The first time Daniel Carter realized something was wrong, it wasn't because of the message on his phone, it was because of the silence in his tiny apartment. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and reminds you of everything you've lost. His 5-year-old son, Ethan, had finally fallen asleep after crying himself into exhaustion, clutching a worn-out stuffed dinosaur that had once belonged to his mother. And Daniel, sitting alone at the edge of the couch, stared at a message that would change everything: dinner tomorrow. 7 p.m. Don't say no. Richard. Before we dive deeper into this story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that change lives, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Daniel Carter wasn't the kind of man who went on dates. Not anymore. Not after losing his wife, Emily, 2 years ago in a car accident that shattered his world into fragments he was still trying to piece back together. He had become a man of routine and responsibility, waking before dawn, preparing Ethan's breakfast, dropping him at daycare, and then disappearing into the glass tower where he worked as a senior accountant. Numbers made sense to him, they followed rules, patterns, logic. Life, on the other hand, had betrayed him without warning. Richard Hamilton, the CEO of the firm, was not a man Daniel interacted with often. A commanding presence with a reputation for being both ruthless and strangely perceptive, Richard had taken an unusual interest in Daniel over the past few months. It started with brief conversations in the hallway, then longer discussions about work, and eventually, unexpected questions about Daniel's life. Questions Daniel wasn't ready to answer. Questions that somehow Richard already seemed to know the answers to. So when that message arrived, Daniel's first instinct was to ignore it. But something about the tone, firm, almost insistent, made him hesitate. The next day at work, Richard didn't give him a choice. He stopped Daniel just as he was about to leave for the day, his voice calm but unwavering, telling him that life wasn't meant to be survived alone, that Ethan deserved to see his father smile again, and that sometimes, the universe nudged people when they refused to move on their own. Daniel tried to protest, but the words died in his throat. He wasn't ready. He didn't want this. But deep down, there was a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time, fear mixed with curiosity. The restaurant was nothing like the places Daniel usually went. It was elegant, softly lit, with warm golden tones and the faint hum of quiet conversations. He felt out of place in his simple shirt, his hands slightly trembling as he checked the time again and again. Every instinct told him to leave, to retreat back into the safety of his routine, but he stayed. For Ethan. For the small voice in his heart that whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to feel something other than grief. And then she walked in. Daniel's breath caught in his chest as he looked up, his world tilting in a way he couldn't explain. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, though she was, in a quiet, unassuming way, but it was something deeper, something almost surreal. Her name was Olivia Bennett, and the moment their eyes met, Daniel felt as if time had folded in on itself. Because Olivia wasn't just a stranger. She was someone from a life he thought was long buried. Years ago, before Emily, before responsibilities and heartbreak, Olivia had been his closest friend. They had shared dreams, laughter, and a bond that neither of them had fully understood at the time. But life had pulled them apart, careers had taken them in different directions, and eventually, they had lost touch. Daniel had moved on, or at least, he had tried to. And now, here she was, standing in front of him, looking just as shocked as he felt. The evening unfolded in a strange, almost dreamlike haze. There were moments of awkward silence, punctuated by hesitant smiles and fragments of memories that resurfaced like echoes from another lifetime. Olivia had changed, of course. There was a quiet strength in her now, a depth in her eyes that spoke of her own struggles and triumphs. She told him about her work as a child psychologist, about the children she helped every day, about the losses she had faced and the lessons she had learned. And Daniel, for the first time in years, found himself opening up. Not completely, not all at once, but enough to let her see the man behind the grief. What Daniel didn't know, what Richard had carefully kept from him, was that this meeting wasn't a coincidence. Richard had known Olivia through a charity foundation they both supported, and when he learned about her past connection with Daniel, he saw an opportunity. Not to manipulate, but to heal. He believed that some people were meant to find their way back to each other, even if life had separated them for years. But healing is never simple. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel found himself caught in a storm of emotions he didn't know how to navigate. Spending time with Olivia brought him a sense of comfort he hadn't felt in years, but it also stirred up guilt. Guilt for feeling happy, guilt for moving forward, guilt for even considering the possibility of loving someone again. Every laugh felt like a betrayal of Emily's memory, every moment of peace like something he didn't deserve. Ethan, however, saw things differently. Children often do. He took to Olivia almost immediately, his small, fragile heart opening up to her warmth and kindness in a way that both amazed and terrified Daniel. Watching them together, Olivia reading Ethan a bedtime story, Ethan giggling in a way Daniel hadn't heard in so long, made something shift inside him. It was as if a door he had locked away had slowly begun to open. The turning point came on a quiet evening when Ethan fell ill. It wasn't anything serious, but for Daniel, it triggered a wave of panic he couldn't control. Memories of loss flooded his mind, and he found himself standing helplessly, overwhelmed by fear. And in that moment, Olivia was there. She didn't try to fix everything or offer empty reassurances. She simply stayed. She held Ethan's hand, comforted him, and gave Daniel the strength he didn't realize he needed. That night, as Daniel sat beside Ethan's bed, watching him sleep peacefully, he realized something profound. Moving forward didn't mean forgetting. Loving again didn't erase the past. Emily would always be a part of his story, a chapter that shaped who he was. But it didn't have to be the end of the book. And maybe, just maybe, Olivia was the beginning of a new chapter. As the story nears its end, there's something I want to ask you. If this journey has touched even a small part of your heart, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. And before we reach the final moment, here's a special request: write in the comments the name of someone who brought light back into your life when you needed it the most. The final scene wasn't grand or dramatic. There were no elaborate gestures or perfect words. It was a simple morning, sunlight streaming through the windows of Daniel's apartment, Ethan laughing as he chased his toy dinosaur across the floor, and Olivia standing in the kitchen, making breakfast as if she had always been there. Daniel watched them, a quiet smile forming on his lips, and for the first time in years, the silence in his home didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful. Because sometimes, life doesn't give you what you expect. Sometimes, it gives you what you need. And sometimes, the person you never thought you'd see again becomes the reason you finally learn how to live again.